lot of resources taken out of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is, the way that Puerto Rico is treated by this country is absolutely horrendous. And then, the same way that resources were taken out of communities in order to help people to have to make a decision to go like into the military and do those sorts of things. That same thing happens in Puerto Rico, and those people there are being brought here to police black communities as well. And so there's a lot of militarized activities that are related to our community specifically, and that we need to be having our own kind of internal focus on as it relates to how we're going to address those things. And that's what the Black Alliance for Peace is. Also with the Elm Philly, and with an organization, with a group called the Youth Cooperative, which is a small cooperative now that is developing to basically build outside of the system. Where I come from, I'm just going to say, first of all, I have a history of activism. I've worked as an activist, my activism really started when I was a child. I started trying to make changes in my neighborhood. I dismantled a drug corner by giving the young men, helping the young men that were there figure out where opportunities were for them. I did a lot of tutoring when I was younger. My work, the few years that I actually worked jobs with people were in nonprofits, where I was first working with kids that were considered at-risk youth, and then began to work with adults in welfare work programs and things like that. And then I did a lot of community development. I started tutoring and volunteer programs in local public schools in my community. I redeveloped, public spaces in my community. I did a lot of work with the local elected officials and worked with campaigns. And I was always very optimistic, and I still am naturally optimistic. I'm optimistic by nature, and loving by nature, and love all life by nature. Like in my house, I sweep. Aside from if I saw a roach or a mosquito, pretty much anything else, I'm going to capture it and get it outside. And I literally am that person who I swept a snake up and that I found in my southern home and put it outside. And even wasps and bumblebees. People are like, why are you trying to catch that wasp in a cup? But I don't see any reason to kill them. They're not swarming in my house, right? And so this is my nature. This is who I am. And I began to be known a little bit more nationally when during the Bernie Sanders campaign, I became a spokesperson for Bernie or Bust. However people feel about that, that was what I did. And I traveled around the country. I was not a surrogate. A lot of people think that I was a surrogate for Bernie Sanders. I was not a surrogate for Bernie Sanders. I called myself his step surrogate, actually. I rolled with the surrogates, but I was not, because I was Bernie or Bust, and Bernie was never able to be supportive of that position. I was never one of his surrogates. But I traveled a lot, and I did a lot of speaking, and a lot of my conversations and a lot of work I was doing was with this whole progressive community. And and I was known, people would just be like, oh, yeah, I love when you talk about love, and you're so love-oriented, and it's true, because that's who I am at my core. And a lot of my work was with a whole variety of people. And I just began to hit that place that Black activists hit when working with the white community and the left white community of this is where the source of all my problems are. My problems are not with the conservative community. I know who they are, they know who they are, I know where they stand, they know where they stand, but what I've come to really understand, and in my conversations, breaking down in conversations with other Black activists, is that the white activist community is more invested in the look of the work than the actual work itself. That's the experience that I have when I'm sitting here. My impetus is that I see little Black kids on my block who when I'm looking at these little Black boys, I see kids who are being targeted by mass incarceration. I see kids whose teachers are afraid of them by the time they're in 3rd grade. And this, I look at these kids, and it breaks my heart because I know, like, I see all their optimism and I see all their sweetness, and I know what they're being turned into. And in the school one of the schools that I established a volunteer community at, there was my goddaughter went there. My goddaughter is biracial. And while she was at that school, and she was a little prayerful, Quaker little girl, and it's like, praying for her, like, why isn't anybody holding that little girl's hand while she's walking across the street? Like, this is, and she starts at her school, and she's coming, and she's like, Mommy, why are they giving us jelly donuts for, that's not breakfast, and she's, like, very informed. But by the time she had been in that school for about 3 months, she was, like, throwing chairs and calling herself a fucking idiot. And, and the environment, in spite of who her mother was, in spite of who her father was, in spite of her community and her culture, the environment was transforming this young person. And she was removed from the school, and then it took her several years. They moved to Montana, where her mother is from, because I don't know what it is about Montana that makes them have all good public schools. I don't know what it is about racial but it took her a couple of years to wash off just that one kindergarten year's experience. And I think about kids who are in that environment, kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, and then how those kids are supposed to be functioning in a way that's really productive, and then not be their fault when they're not, and then the blaming of parents. So this is the reality that I'm working with when I sit with somebody who tells me how important healthcare is. How when they're fighting for universal healthcare, they're fighting for me. That's not true. It's not true. When you're fighting for universal healthcare, you're fighting for yourself. If you want to know what it means to fight for me in my community, you need to ask me instead of telling me what it is that needs to be happening in, what my priority needs to be within the context and the realm of politics. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. We're not on the outline. Right?
Yeah, that's okay. Outlines are really suggestions.
I do want to do the activity that Anthony, first I wanted to, so there was another person who was supposed to be here with us today, Anthony Rogers Wright. Anthony Rogers Wright was actual official Bernie surrogate. He's written a lot of policy and fixed policy for people like Bernie, but for other candidates who are running, progressive candidates. I really do hate that term, so I'm going to always do that. Progressive candidates, and he is like really, really a very strong and important voice in the environmental and the climate community, and particularly as a black man in that community, where there's like this appearance that the only people that care about climate is white men, and maybe a few white women, but like the voice, all of the conversation, all of the articles written, he actually is going to be publishing a book, but maybe the first book, it'll be certainly one of the first books from a black climate activist, that will be speaking to some of these things that we are talking about today. But he has been traveling for,
the elements have been against him to him getting here today, so that's why he's not here today.
But he wanted to apologize.
Yeah, but my husband is actually going to do double duty. And he's so focused on that he's not paying attention to me right now at this. So you're gonna have to come over here. But this is what we do, right? So I think that's a great moment right there. Like a lot of black organizations, this is how we operate, even in our own communities, because we have been dealing with some of these issues for so long, and it's so much work, and it's so tiring, it's so overpowering, that you have small pockets of people kind of all over the place doing everything. And you've literally got people who are like the cameraman, they're writing the articles, they're on the panels, then they're getting food and they're making sure people are fed, and then they're making sure people have a place to stay, and they're picking people up from the train station, and they're and we don't have the support that we have seen, especially in this new evolving progressive space. That we don't get the support that we've seen white progressives get. And as we've experienced in this past 2 years, especially, I've always kind of known it, but this last campaign just laid it bare for me that even among well-meaning white people, and I guess we should have given a disclaimer before we started. I'm eventually going to cuss at some point, so I'm sorry. And there are going to be points in this conversation where it's going to seem like we're mad as hell, and that's because we are. Don't take it personally. This is just like generational anger. This is just like my mama's leftover anger, right? This is my grandmama's leftover anger. This is, my great-grandmama's leftover anger. Our ancestors like, why the fuck are they still having to deal with this shit? I thought the work we did would have been done by now. So this anger, that's what it is. So that's the second thing I would like for our white allies to leave here with. Our anger is not directed at you personally. It's not. It's directed at the fact that we're still having to fight this fucking system.
And it's funny that you're saying that because I was at the opening of the Lynch Memorial in Alabama, and while I was there, we had there was a woman named Catherine Flowers, who is an activist who works in Lowndes County, who took a bunch of us on tours, and we saw a few things, including like the fighting, the fight. There was a memorial around the march, and the fight for the voting rights in Birmingham, and just what people went through, and this memorial is across the street from a national park where when people who were sharecropping and registered to vote, if they registered to vote, which was something that was like they had a right that they had, but were being blocked from them. If they still went ahead and overcame things and registered to vote, they would be kicked off of the land that they were sharecropping. And so then they ended up building basically a shanty town where all these people were now living in tents, and they would have to have shotguns under their beds because people would drive by and just shoot over in this area, on a daily basis. And so just having the audacity to register to vote, not even having cast a vote yet, was something that would be a reason for those individuals who were owning the land to remove their home. These people may have been sharecropping on this land for 10 years. They may have been, and everything in their whole life was invested in this land. And now they had not the land, no ability to earn, no ability to feed themselves, no place to live, but a tent that was getting bullets shot at them. And there was a point where we were with some students from Duke who have been working with Ms. Catherine for a few, on some issues there around, like, they don't have septic systems, so their septic, this community, the city does not feel, this poor black community, the city does not feel any responsibility to actually provide septic systems for that city. So everybody has to have their own individual septic systems. The septic systems are failing, and then they're getting fined like $500 a day, and then they get in prison, and for not paying their fines. And in the meantime, this stuff is building up and going into their homes, backing into their sinks, then they have mold in their homes. It's toxic. They have hookworm. The United Nations has visited this area, and if you read the report that was on poverty in the U.S., they actually reference their visit to Lowndes County and the fact that the conditions there are more deplorable, or as deplorable as what they find in undeveloped countries. And they found illnesses and ailments there that do not exist that generally do not exist in a community like a wealthy country like the United States, right? And so, I'm there and I'm talking after we went through this tour, and I see all of this stuff, and I'm talking to these students, and I'm just going to tell you guys, I'm an emotional person, so it just happens. I can't even begin to try to really hold it, but I'm talking to these kids, and I'm just like, I don't know why I keep getting so emotional, guys, and then I went and I said, I finally realized it though. It's because you guys are sitting here and engaging. These kids are about my daughter's age. My daughter's 21. You guys are engaging in these activities that I don't want you to have to engage in. This whole pass it on to the next generation, I'm tired of that. It's time for us to actually get to the point where we've actually instituted solutions and we're building on those solutions. And that's not what's happening. What we're doing is we're transforming the same fucked up bullshit and just changing what it looks like. That's what it is, like, that's what you do when you go from having enslavement to sharecropping. You know, now we've got, you know, we went through Jim Crow, we had the little reprieve of the civil rights, you know, era that was like an era at a time and a moment of hope. And then we go right back into this thing with mass incarceration and militarization in our community. So, you know, there are more black men who are incarcerated than there have been enslaved. And you know, so, you know, there's not a change in our circumstances, there's a change in the way that the same thing is implemented in our communities. And so what was it that you said that made me think about that in the first place? Just like knowing this, that we're still constantly doing the same thing. That there's no progress, you know, there's just, and that's why I hate the term progressive. Because to me it's very much sounds like incrementalism. And what incrementalism is to me is exactly that. It is moving from enslavement to mass incarceration. And what we need to do is we need to move to equity, equality, and justice. And that needs to be whole in it. And there's this constant, and that's one of the things that Martin Luther King talked about, that, you know, he said that the problem is not so much the, I don't remember the term of the people at that time, but the people on the right.
So much the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, it wasn't the Klan.
Oh no, you said the Citizens Council.
Right,
That's what
yeah.
it was, yeah.
But it was the moderate, which at that time was the liberal of yesterday would now be the progressive of today, which is, you know, these individuals who constantly want to tell us what our struggle is supposed to be and how fast we're supposed to be able to move forward and getting what it is like that they already have. The rights and privileges that are owned and experienced and not even thought about by all people from the white, that associate with the white community or associate with whiteness. Those are things that we're supposed to be taking our time and being realistic around when we're supposed to get it, right?
Right, yeah, and I think that kind of manifested itself in a couple of speeches here yesterday and last night, right? Now, I understand that this is a Democratic Party event. I get that, and this is supposed to be the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Okay, fine. I have to, just full disclosure, I left the Democratic Party. When did we jump ship? Probably, this was actually before the Sanders campaign.
It was during Obama's second term.
It was during Obama's, probably like the first year of Obama's second term. We are like literally holding our breath, waiting for the first black president to say some real black shit, to help some real black people. And we're like, oh, that's not happening. Okay, so, and nobody's gonna make him do it. And when black people tried to push him to that, then because of the circumstances he was in, then those black people who were trying to push for that change for us, we were shut down. So it's like, okay, we have no friends. So let's not keep playing this game anymore. But we come here because we do believe that some people understand that there is an enormous gap in between the ideals of the Democratic Party and the ideals of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and where we need to be, right? So that's where we're hoping you guys are. So here's where what Yarnay said manifested itself in some speeches from yesterday. Cory Booker came in and spoke about, you know, being from the poorest ward in Newark. He is, you know, from Newark, but he's actually from Bergen County, which is actually a pretty wealthy area in New Jersey. But you know, look, I'm not gonna knock people for where they live, for where they was raised at. That's where their parents raised them, and that's fine. But you know, he talks about the promise of America and how, you know, there's so much hope and you know, we're all in the context of this current administration, right? As if this current administration is the worst thing that's ever happened. And it's not. Because if you live in Newark, you can attest to the fact that Cory Booker was involved in undercutting the Newark public schools with Betsy DeVos and her private school, and her charter school movement. Cory Booker has close ties with Betsy DeVos. As a matter of fact, when her organization started to set up shop in Newark, he welcomed them. and said that this was a great thing. He was involved in that $100 million fiasco with the public school system that Mark Zuckerberg was involved in. Now, that money didn't go anywhere near the students or the schools because nobody asked the teachers what they should do with the money. These nice, liberal, progressive white people came into a predominantly black, predominantly poor school system, didn't ask the people who needed the resources, who were having the problem, hey, how can we best help you? They swooped in with their $100 million, got on Oprah. Yeah, I can't stand her. It's personal. I can't stand Oprah. Got on Oprah, and she's, oh, they're $1 million, and everyone's cheering. There was not a public school teacher on that stage. There was not a student from Newark County, Newark schools on that stage. And when it came out that that $100 million disappeared, nobody went on Oprah and explained that shit. When that $100 million disappeared and all these charter schools popped up from DeVos and her organization, and there was all that mismanagement, nobody explained to those students what happened. So Cory Booker comes out and is the face of let's be honest, he's the Democratic black face of neoliberal incrementalism. And he makes white Democrats feel good because he talks about the progress that's been made. But he doesn't talk about the wreckage that is still existing in our communities, partially because of his involvement, but primarily because of the corruption and the white supremacy in the system. And that exists among the attitudes of some well-meaning white people who want to do good with their money, but they don't want to engage the people that they want to do good for, right?
Part of that goes to the idea that, like part of what comes with white supremacy is the idea that whiteness is where all goodness comes from, and where all value comes from. One thing that Anthony had asked me to do, an exercise that I'm going to do really quickly, I'm going to do it a little bit differently, but I want to ask all the white people in the room to stand up. Okay, so now I'm going to make an ask of those who are standing. If you are progressive, stay standing. Okay, so I'm going to make another ask. All those who are racist, continue to stand. Awesome, thank you. That's it, you can sit down. So I think it's really important to acknowledge the, where we are and where our heads are in the room, because, we know that we live in a society in which, you cannot, with the way we're born here and raised here, you are introduced to this concept. First, you're just alive. Then you're introduced to this idea that you are white, right? And the idea of race is introduced, and where you fit into this rainbow of race, is introduced, and then you kind of buy into this idea of being white. And as you buy into and are reinforcing the idea of your whiteness, then you're also having enforced all the ideas of white supremacy, and they're very deeply connected, and they're very subconsciously inserted, and they're inserted through our educational system, they're inserted through media and through all kinds of propaganda, even from things like, I remember when I was an undergraduate at Temple, and they had a course called Intellectual Heritage. Like in your liberal college, you have your core curriculum, and you have like your women's studies and your African American studies, and all these different forms that you have to take a course in so that you can be well-rounded. But intellectual heritage was like very specific, and these 2 courses that everyone had to take, and they talked about how all of our intellectual heritage comes from Rome and Greece, right? All of our intellectual heritage, right? And that's pretty much like the foundation of like how everything is taught. When I was getting my master's at Bennington, in writing and literature, and one of the students was giving a lecture to graduate. Part of the graduation process, you have to give a lecture, and one of the students was giving a lecture about like the diversity of literature that there is across the continent, because she is from Uganda, and very unusual. There were like 1 black student per graduating class. not even one Asian student per graduating class, one Latina student for the entire, like when I went in there, there was one who was graduating out, you know, one indigenous student who came in while I was there. It was a very, very white program. So the fact that this woman was from Uganda was like really significant. And she's talking about this, and there are a lot of questions that going on. And one of the faculty member afterwards came to me and he's like, you know, I really do feel like I want to, you know, introduce a diversity of literature to my students, but then how do I make sure that they get the core, right? How do I make sure they get the fundamentals? And of course, it's not occurring to him to question what it is that's fundamental, right? And so as it relates to, you know, like, and I was even having a conversation last night with this young sister, and, you know, who is Nigerian and U.S. and Black American, and she was saying that, you know, everything she was talking about and trying to explore and figure out what do we do was always in the context of this very one governance kind of system. Like even trying to think outside and even trying to think from this place of liberation, it's all squared inside of like the assumption that the social structure, and it's even, she couldn't see it, and then like she kept trying to, no, but you're still doing it, but you're still doing it all night. I just kept on trying to help her to understand. She's seeing everything inside of the box of this structure that is based on the ideas that what it is that was given to us, or that we build everything on, is the only way to do things. Like that people have to have private land, for example, like that private land ownership is the way it's supposed to be. That the boundaries are where they're supposed to be. That these like everything about our governance, that we should have an education system. There should be a first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth. Like everything can be questioned, but there's so many pieces that we can't even figure out how to question. Even something as simple as like where you go to determine what a word means. And what words are actually legitimately considered words and what words are not. Like we go to the Webster's Dictionary to determine whether or not the right way to say it is converse or conversate. It doesn't matter if half the population says conversate, we will still decide that that's wrong because the white man that wrote the Webster's Dictionary said that the right word is converse. Who is it that gives that individual the authority to decide even the most core basic thing of like what language is right and what language is wrong and what language is slang? You know, but we don't question these things, and that is a basic example of the way that we are not questioning things that we are confronting other communities with. So when you bring in, like when there was that one black man that came in as a student while I was there, because all of the black students were women, so that one black man who came in as a student, at some point in time, people were afraid that he was going to shoot the school up, even though that's not even what black cats do. You know, that's a white cat thing. You know what I'm saying? But they were scared he was going to shoot the school up because he was reciting some Tupac lyrics. If he had been talking the same thing with some Shakespeare lyrics, then maybe they would have been comfortable. Never does he get to, he's been to Stanford, he had gone to Sarah Lawrence, now he's at Bennington. Never does he get to take off the white academic shroud and just be his black self, because you want to bring in black face, but you don't want to bring in black culture, you don't want to bring in black experience, you don't want to bring in, there's a diversity that's beyond just the appearance of individuals. That that when that part of the experience is what people are getting confronted with, that's when those individuals begin to be damaged. That's when those individuals begin to be traumatized in these spaces, and that's the reason why, to the point of the outline, that progressive spaces are not safe for people of color, and are certainly not safe for black people. I speak from my experience as a black woman, that progressive spaces are not safe for black women. And I find this in my anti-oppression training, that the more people become aware of these things and accept them, the more they also become aggressive and against people. So you go into a space and you provide anti-oppression training, and then everybody's like, yeah, and then there's all this hope and optimism that the community, the people that are from the communities of color, from the sun-kissed communities, have from going through this training, and this community that is saying we're committed to this, and then they're committed to it in the front of their minds. But then what you end up experiencing is, now you're like, I can come and talk to you about what it is that I've just felt. Like I've just felt this experience that was oppressive. I've just been triggered, and I come to talk to you about it now because we've got a foundation that we can talk about. And then it's that fragility pops up. And oh no, then you're calling me a racist. Oh no, I'm not this, you know. And then you end up being more attacked, you know, as a result of having had some hope. As a result of having made this agreement to a commitment to doing better, people end up doing worse.
Yeah. And not only are progressive spaces not safe for black women, but I think that white people in progressive spaces don't realize how even positive movements have been harmful to black men. And that's particularly why I have my husband here, because see, I don't like to speak for other people because I'm bad at it, right? I'm bad at other people's narratives, and we all should be bad at other people's narratives. But I have noticed something, and I'll tell you this from my perspective, and then I'm going to let him explain to you what it's like. I've noticed that when we're talking about gender issues, and we might have a little bit of agreement between, you know, among white progressives and black women progressives on, you know, gender oppression. Black men are always demonized. And some white progressive women think that it is okay to demonize black men as all rapists and all, you know, suffering from black male patriarchy, and, you know, they're all oppressing you. So they see my relationship with my husband and how we play off each other. I fall back sometimes, he falls back sometimes. And I've had people tell me, like, why are you letting him upstage you? Like, you don't know what goes on in this house, do you? You don't understand what this is. So I recognize that is an outcropping of the feminist movement being something that was created out of addressing the needs specifically of white women, which were problems like having equality with men in the workplace, being able to be allowed to work, being able to be to manage our own money. Those are never problems that black women had, because black men were always at the bottom of the rung in this society. They were never able to make enough money to support their families on just one income like most white men were, so black women always had to work. So for me, always having to explain to people, it's not just Jacqueline Luqman, it's Abdul Shahid Luqman too. We're a team. And to see the kind of resistance to that I get from white women in particular, it's bothersome. But what are your perspectives on what it's been like for us?
Well, let me first say this. I heard earlier that, you know, race, that people of color, black people in particular, that we understand that race is a construct, that it's a human creation, and it's something that was used, as you stated earlier, something that was used, you know, by Europeans in order to justify the exploitation, economic exploitation of mainly African enslaved people. But I will say this, that in this country, as a black person, you learn very early the color dynamics, the racial dynamics in this country. I'll give you a personal story. I remember I was in a bank some years ago, and it was two white children about the same age, toddlers, maybe about 3 years old. And we were standing in line. I was going to cash my paycheck. And the little white child was running around, being a kid, running around, getting in this, getting in that, getting in that. And so the little black child did the same thing, running around, getting into this, getting into that. And they were both just being children. But it wasn't the children that were the problem. It was the way that the adults, which were black and white in the line, responded to the way that these kids were going. So when the little white toddler was going around being a kid and all up in your face and doing all this stuff, the response to that child was more positive. People smiled. People was like, oh, wow, he's so cute. And people did this and people did that. And they affirmed the existence of that child. They affirmed that what this child was doing was nothing wrong. He was being a kid. I also watched the way that they responded to the same black child who was doing just the same thing. And what surprised me that this didn't come from white people. This came from blacks. And I noticed the black adults was frowning with this disapproving look, like, you shouldn't be doing that. And his mother, I think it was his mother, she said, get over here. You can't run around and do this. You can't do that. You can't do that. And the child immediately stopped being a kid. And another incident was when there was a young mother with another young black male child who wanted some ice cream. And his mother said to him, and it still gets me when I think about it, she said, you're not white. Why do you can't have this, but you think you white? Kid's only like 3, 4 years old. He just wanted ice cream, but his mother said, so what I'm saying is that these messages get reinforced in us at a very, very early age. And so you start to come up realizing that your personhood is not as valuable as the personhood of other people. And so, but yet this country still expects you to be able to compete, to be able to learn, to be able to thrive along with everybody else. But then yet the first message that you get is you're not good enough. You can't, you're not, you're not good enough. So when we move on and you talk about black masculinity, one of the things that I've learned, and I'm in my 50s, is that black men have never had the luxury to express their different masculinities as white men have. Black men never had it. Black men can only act 2 ways. Black men can either be docile in order to make everybody comfortable. And we all laugh about this when we're amongst ourselves. When we're around white women, we have to pretend that we don't notice them because we don't want them to get uncomfortable. Now that's starting to happen with black women too now. So we have to tone ourselves down. I have a deep voice. When I'm around white people, I have to lessen that. I have to smile more to make you feel more comfortable. And you can't be yourself. And so what happens is that white men, as we know, through Hollywood, through everything else, they can express their masculinities in all kinds of ways. They can be the geeks, they can be the nerds, they can be Rambo, Clint Eastwood, they can be all that stuff, and that's accepted. But the moment that black men try to express that same type of, as it's considered toxic masculinity now, but when black men try to exhibit the same type of masculine traits and qualities, then it's always deemed as being threatening. When we go, I mean, for the interest of time, I won't go into it, but you guys get what I mean. And one of the things that I think that the progressive movement and this whole so-called progressive movement have done is that it have marginalized black men even further to the side. Jackie's right. I mean, I constantly have to fight in this thing that we do from white feminists who constantly think that I should be out of the picture, that I should not be around, and even black feminists who feel like my presence isn't needed. This is a message that I get. This is a message that a lot of other black men get. And it's a message that it's like we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. We try to get involved and like the CDC came out and said that this myth about the absent black father is a myth. CDC they don't have any skin in the game.
Right.
So, but they said, hey, all this lie that black men aren't involved with their children is a lie. Then other studies came out. But yet you turn on any media, mainstream media, and the lies still persisted. The magical black fathers, the black community would be, it would be so wonderful if these black fathers just come out of the heavens and just take over and all this other kind of stuff. I say this, going back to revisit our earlier point, black people have never had a break since we got to this country. And I think, Yane, you said that. From the time that the first enslaved Africans came to these shores, there has never been a break in our trauma in this country. 200 and some years of slavery, Jim Crow, black codes, sharecropping, convict leasing, on and on and on. Then we go up, because not just a southern thing, then we go up in the north and got redlining. You got all this stuff. You got black veterans who fought in World War II, who came back, like my grandfather, your uncle, great uncle, come back from World War II from defeating fascism, only to come back and couldn't take advantage of the GI Bill. When all of these new suburbs, which helped create the white middle class, was starting to be built, Levittown and all the rest of them started being built, black veterans who fought in the same war, who contributed to the defeat of fascism, and not just the veterans, the families they left behind who filled those factory jobs that started building the arsenal of democracy we're so proud about. When it was over, when Hitler was defeated, Mussolini defeated, and fascism was over, then it was back to the point where the government consciously and purposely stated and had policies that made sure that white people were able to take advantage of the victories over fascism while black people couldn't. So now we come further, and here we are with a wealth gap that if we don't start dealing with this, progressives, that in 2 or 3 decades, black wealth will be zero. This is by all economists who have studied this. There will be no black wealth by the time in about 20, 30 years. In DC, where we're from, the average white family has 81 times more wealth than the average black family. Is that because they worked 81 times harder? No. But yet we come with a $15 hour minimum wage as if that's going to solve everything. The same white progressives that I hear that calls for the abolishment of ICE, the same white progressives that I hear that say that we should call for the abolishment of this, abolishment of that, never want to talk about reparations. The first thing they say to us is, oh, well, that'll never happen, that'll never happen. But you have no problem talking about the dreamers, that they should get amnesty. You never have a problem talking about ICE should be eliminated. Never have a problem talking about we should do this, or we should take in Syrian refugees, or we should do this. All your hearts is bleeding all over the fucking place, except when we say that in order for us to deal with this widening racial wealth gap, which is really the core of the problem in the black community. It's not so much whether you like us or don't like us. It's not, that's not the issue. The issue is there's no money. That's the issue. If you want to deal with crime, if you want to deal with all of the social ills in the black community, it boils down to the core issue is the fact that there is no money. And so the thing of it is that when we come and we say, look, we need to get government policies, because that's the only thing that's going to correct it. $15 hour wage is commendable. But it's not going to deal nothing with the wealth gap, especially when everyone who studied the issue stated that it would take over 200 years for black people to close the wealth gap between whites and black with the racial wealth gap. 200 years. And let's take that number, 200. That 200 years coincides with the length of time we've been in slavery. So you mean to tell me that we're supposed to just forget about it? That we're supposed to just say, oh, that was in the past? You know, I think that a lot of you, and if it don't apply, let it fly, but I think a lot of the reason why white progressives don't talk about it because you don't want to give up the advantage that you got. That's personally how I feel about it.
I already know if it don't apply. I mean, that's the thing, you know. Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's, I mean, this is what I've had to come, this is the realization that I've come to. And you know, and I gave my history because I want to be clear that, like, you know, I don't fuck with electoral politics. And I don't really fuck with organizing with white people. And this is not who I was. This is what organizing with white people turned me into. And I want to be clear about that, like, and I'm not from a position, my personal belief is that everybody should be free. My personal belief is that, you know, I believe in humanity, and I believe that the problems with certain communities are socialized problems. But I don't think that there are problems that can be just like stepped out of. Like, I think that white people, in spite of all of the best interests that we may have, are just compromised. And that, and in spite of what your intentions are, that you sabotage. And, you know, and this is what my experience has been. And so because I actually really am invested in freedom for all people, I feel like I have to really know where people's place is and in the process of securing that freedom. And so, you know, I come from there's the realism of like history, right? Like what you're talking about. Like when the New Deal was established and was being implemented, your parents were not like, we're not going to move into this community, or we're not going to take these loans until they are administered fairly across all communities. Right. They took it, they built the suburbs, and they left us in our fucking ghettos. Yeah. You know, and then let all kinds of environmental toxins be placed, both social and actual physical environmental toxins be placed all around our communities, and then don't say anything much about it. And then swoop into issues like swoop into Flint for a weekend, or swoop on to Standing Rock for a weekend, take pictures, you know, look at how, like, all of, in my experience, the activism of white people is about making themselves feel good.
Yes.
This is what
Yes.
it's about for me. It's not about,
Yes.
it's not about making sure that those kids are not being targeted for police.
Right.
It is, I went on a march and I made a difference. But there's no less hungry kids. There's no less homeless kids. There are no less kids getting bombs dropped on their face, on their heads, because somebody went on a damn march. What happened is that other people in DC who own property, who own hotels, who own restaurants, made a lot of money. And people sold a lot of t-shirts. I've had white progressive friends selling Black Lives Matter t-shirts to raise money for their activism and not give any money to Black Lives Matter.
Tell me
Not
about
to their Black
There you
Lives
go.
Matter in their community, not to Black
That's right.
Lives Matter. Any, you know, they're all over the place.
Not
If
to
you don't
a
like
black
your
life
chapter,
that they actually know.
you know, exactly. And you know, and so, and it's not that, like, I have white people in my circle. Like, there's a woman who puts $50 in my account every month as one of her forms of reparations. She also has contributes money daily in order to help mothers that are coming from sun-kissed communities to be able to get diapers and, you know, and formula. She also makes jewelry and sells that jewelry explicitly to support her race work. She makes donations to organizations that are led by and doing services in communities of color. But she's also not trying to rush to the front. Like, she takes her job and she goes into other white communities and into white people in her community, and she talks and she studies, and then she shares what she studies. She studies herself. She shares what she studies. If she asks me questions, she pays me. She comes into when she she took me out to breakfast to meet with me and have an initial conversation because she had learned about some of my work. She bought my breakfast, paid me $175 for my time, and anytime she works on anything, she sends me money because she recognizes that for her to get liberated, my work needs to be funded.
Right, that's right.
And the liberation of all people is not going to come from anybody but the people who are most oppressed. The way that the system is, you have white supremacy that's sitting here at the top and it's pushing everybody down. Everybody. Because the white supremacy is based not just on the idea that white people are the best people. That's what it communicates, so that those who associate with whiteness can buy in and be their best agents, which is what happens.
Right.
But the reality is that white supremacy is the real truth of white supremacy is the idea that cis, straight, white, wealthy men are the top. And those are the only people who are protected by our system. And they are then protected by the ones that they consider their most privileged subjects, which are the rest of the white men. And then under that are their most precious subjects, which are the white women, which will never, even it's true that white women in this system will never be equal to white men. That's true. But they will, in that feminist fight was about just that. Just white women becoming equal to white men so that the white women and white men could oppress equally.
Right.
You know,
share
it's
that
funny
level
because
of power.
I love when you said that because I think Chris Rock was one of the comedians said that the feminist movement was about the white man having everything and the white woman being mad that she didn't get her cut.
Right. Yeah, he said that. And then the flip side of that, at the very, very bottom, the part that holds it all up is anti-blackness. And everything else is squeezed inside of there. So you have all these other forms of oppression, you know, that are organized here and that are strategically moved around, or sometimes just allowed to be wherever they want to be. But then other times when it's expedient for some reason, strategically, then they're intentionally moved around. Sometimes the Muslims might be as low as the black. Sometimes the immigrants, you know, the Latino immigrants might be as low as the blacks. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the Japanese might be as low as the blacks. But the blacks hold the bottom. Mm-hmm. They hold the bottom. And so the way to push the top off of white supremacy is to have that community being pushed to the top. And so that is where the funneling into that community is where liberation comes. It does not come from people who are so far removed from the worst problems trying to be the ones who offer the solutions and implement the solutions, because they're not genuine solutions. They are not touching lives. These marches, they are insulting. They infuriate me, because when we march And I'm not talking about the March on Washington March, okay, because that was also a co-opted march. Even though there's this great love, you know, for I Have a Dream speech and all of that, it was a co-opted march. It was not originally supposed to be like that. It was angry black people.
That's right. That's right.
And the black people that the white leadership was comfortable with was inserted into that march in order to help to shape it in a way and to shape the message in a way that will make people comfortable and that we can remember forever as being dreamy for everybody.
And let's look at how co-opted this march was from the perspective of history, right? This is why understanding history is critically important in this fight. We remember it as the March on Washington. What was the actual name of the march?
I don't know what was it.
It was the March on Washington for Jobs and Justice. That's what black people have always been fighting for, justice and equality in this country. But because we only remember our history, even the co-opted history, has been so co-opted to completely eliminate why we even bother.
They tried to do it to Malcolm too.
Exactly. So we're told that Martin Luther King Jr., all he said that day was, I have a dream, but they never tell you that Martin Luther King Jr. said that we coming to Washington to get our check. He said it. It came out of his mouth. What Martin Luther King Jr. actually said, that this system is so unequal, and people, especially poor black people in the South, are so oppressed that maybe some form of democratic socialism is the answer. Martin Luther King Jr. said that. So what does all this mean in the context of electoral politics? Now I have to say this. I do believe that there needs to be different avenues of working to change this system. We need people to not fuck with electoral politics anymore. I absolutely believe that. Because everybody can't be focused on getting out the vote. Some people need to be focused on agitating folks in the community who I don't want to listen to politicians anymore. I need to work with my people, because we need people in our communities to do political education. And honestly, we can't trust anybody else to do that for our people but us. That's the truth. And to be really, really honest, we can't trust a whole lot of people to educate other people on our political and social history but us too. But that's a lot of heavy emotional work. So this is why we're hoping you're here, so that you're interested in learning, what do I not know? What do I not understand? What am I not getting right? Help me get it right so I can go and get it right to some other folks who need to get it right.
But it also, from the panel yesterday, and I think that we can't ignore this, is the fact that this can't be done for free.
Thank you.
See, and this is the thing, that the panel yesterday, the young lady that, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but she made a very good, important point, is the fact that you have people like Yane, like my wife here, and others who may be out there, that do this for a living. You know, they actually are, they're experts at this, and yet it's always, like Dr. John Henry Clark said, even with the relationship with Africa, the fact that Africa is like what he said is a place where people want something, but they don't want to pay for it.
Nobody wants to pay for it.
And that's the way that they're doing the sons and daughters of Africa. You know, I think you said it, Yane, or one of y'all said it, is like, you love black culture. Black culture from this country, David Simon said, that if the United States was to end today, two things that would emerge would be constitutional democracy and black American culture. So black American culture is just important when it comes to the identity of this country. And it has taken the world. You can't go anywhere in oppressed communities and not hear hip hop that originated with the black children from America. You can't go anywhere in this world where there's oppressed people and they don't use hip hop as a form to express themselves. The style, the swag, all of this stuff. And so the thing of it is the fact that people love black culture, but they don't want black people. And that's the thing. So
they want them to separate. So
right.
Black people without the culture,
right.
If the black people and their bodies are present, then they don't want the culture because they don't want to engage
Exactly.
that really.
Exactly.
But they want the culture without the black body.
And it's amazing because we were with a Lyft driver the other day, longtime resident of New Orleans, who told us that after Katrina, when they was moving all the black people out, and forcing them out, businesses started to suffer. Because white folks come here for the black people. They don't come here for nothing else. So they said that all the black folks were dispersed, and when they found out that they didn't have that New Orleans flavor, because the black folks were dispersed, they weren't letting them back, they would offer them money to return back to the city.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So we got to stop playing this game.
Yeah,
but
black bodies are used for currency.
Right.
Yeah.
But also getting back to my original point is the fact that we have to, if white allies or so-called allies are really interested in this work, then you got to start hiring some of these people, start using these people in order to come and speak to your groups. Because I mean, as much as we can sit here and try to understand it, it's not going to be the same.
Right. I mean, and just in the context of this particular conference, right? Because I don't like to have conversations with people, and particularly electoral politics. Because I don't like to have these kinds of conversations with people without giving them some homework. I just don't. Because why bother if you don't have some marching orders? And unfortunately, I can't test you to make sure that you do it. But look, you're here out of your own volition. So listen, what does all this mean in the context of electoral politics? Those people who are on the main stage downstairs. When somebody like Kamala Harris speaks, or Cory Booker, or what's his name, Tim Ryan, or any of the current candidates, because that's why they're here, y'all. They're running for president. All of those people on the main stage downstairs, they're all running for president, and they all want you to vote for them. Mm-hmm. When they start talking, if they are not bringing up black issues, get up and walk the fuck out. Honestly. Because if you claim you are a progressive, and let's be clear about what progressivism is. Progressivism is supposed to be policies that implement progress towards social and economic equality in a society. That's what progressivism is. You cannot be a progressive if you are unconcerned about actual equality and justice, economic equality, equality in health care. You know, people are talking a lot about Medicare for all, and okay, we need universal health care. It doesn't make sense that we're the only developed country in the world where people actually have medical bills that they go bankrupt from and are homeless because of. That's ignorant. It's ignorant and it's hateful. But let me explain to you why this is an issue that we can't look at from a progressive perspective and say, this is going to solve problems for black people. Because of the racialized delivery of health care in this country. I can go into a hospital and say, I have excruciating pain in my abdomen and I don't know what it is. They might get around to me. First of all, if I live in a poor neighborhood, and we do, the hospital I go to that's near to us, their emergency room is going to be full anyway because everybody poor. Half the people don't have health care, and the emergency room is their doctor. Universal health care is not going to change that outcome for black people or poor people. I can encounter a doctor like my husband has. We have to go home and fight this Monday. We have a doctor, my husband has a doctor who he has diabetes, ran out of his medication, diabetes medication. Called his doctor, just called to get the prescription filled. Doctor refused to call him back. Called the doctor 4 times. It's a hospital in a poor neighborhood, predominantly poor area, predominantly poor clientele in Southeast DC. That would never happen at Georgetown University Hospital.
Would not.
Thank God we have a relationship with our pharmacist who's like, who does that? And our pharmacist is from Pakistan. And he's like, I don't even understand this system in here. He's like, but why? Why would I not give you your medication? But see, everybody doesn't have. Nobody should have to have that kind of an experience. But if you are poor in this country and if you are black, you do. So sometimes you go without medication because you don't have a primary care physician, or if you do, he's in a practice where they don't value the lives of poor and black people. Right. So when you run out of your medication, If you call to get a refill, you might get a call back, you might not. So you don't have medication. So what do? That universal health care isn't going to fix that.
And it's funny because I just published a piece about that. It's on Medium. It's Progressive Army published it. It's on my website. And if anybody wants a card, I have cards too. And if you go to my website, I have I have some of my writing on my website. And that's one of the things that I talked about. In writing about this subject is a two-part piece. That's the first part is we have nothing to lose. The second part is but our chains. And it talks about just, how I just feel like progressives really don't care about our issues. And that's one of the things that I talked about in there. It's like, it's very similar to the public school system. Like, yeah, everybody should have access to a public school, but I just described to you earlier what the public school in my neighborhood is like. So, access is not to this, universal access to this is not in and of itself a thing, and there's no conversation with these different sun-kissed communities to say how does, if you really are interested in having our communities be involved in this healthcare for all fight, understand what healthcare for us needs to look like and where the gap is. It's not going to be relevant without that understanding. And all of these issues, with $15 an hour minimum wage is insufficient. It's insufficient for everybody in a lot of communities.
Yeah.
Right.
But then it's insufficient in different ways in different communities. If you have single parent households because, now maybe somebody from your household is in prison because of, marijuana, that now these millionaires are making more millions and millions of dollars with legally, and they're not in prison, for the same exact, selling the same exact thing, and then you've only got one income. That $15 an hour is going to mean something different than if there's, at least the potential for both of the people, in this family to be able to bring that in. So there are just a lot of realities that these little pieces don't fix for other communities that are not being considered and not being sought out. And this goes to the lack of leadership, of the people who are most oppressed. Those are the people who need to be at the forefront of the fight. But I just wanted to, so as it relates to your homework, I'm thinking maybe we can establish or, play with the idea of a way to represent that. And what I pictured in my head is if you are hearing one of these candidates speak, that, that there's a way that we can begin to establish, I want to hear what you have to say about race issues around race. Where do you stand on racial justice? And maybe if we're sitting in a room, obviously one might feel funny if you're in the space by yourself and no one else in the room has heard this. But in the room that next room you're in has heard this. But if we were all, imagine if you're sitting in a room and you have a candidate up there talking and somebody just goes in and just stand like this. Waiting to hear, where do you stand on racial justice? And if you don't tell me where you stand on racial justice, then I'm walking out.
Right.
I like it.
There needs to be a way that we are saying that we take this seriously and that we hold it accountable, that we're holding people accountable. But I wanted to just really quickly, and then I knew we're running out of time. But I wanted to see, because I saw some reactions from people in the audience who were like, yes, that's right, girl, yes. I wanted to open up for anybody who, any other sun-kissed people who may have some experiences that they wanted to share or that they related to, and just so you know, I use the term sun-kissed people because I do not like the idea of my community being defined against another community. So I don't like, for instance, the term people of color. It's still defined against this idea of whiteness. I also don't like, some of the other, I don't like the term, even the term Latino, it's defined based on the colonizer.
Right.
And so, even the term Native American, because it's the people who are here before the term America was applied to this land.
Right. Still defined by that settler colonist.
Right. Exactly.
Framework.
So I use the term sun-kissed people. My brother Anthony uses the term also melanin blessed. I wanted to invite, if there's anybody who wanted to share anything from your experience from the sun-kissed, those sun-kissed people in the room, I wanted to invite you to share something, and then if we have time to open the floor for some questions, if a person has, had any particular question, and if we do have time, I'll also share with the matrix effects, because Anthony wanted us to talk about that a little bit. but we'll see if we have time. So did anybody have anything that you wanted to share from your experiences, or, you know, anything that just...
Don't be shy.
Hey, there's a young lady right there.
I wanted to kind of share a story too. I never really thought about the access to universal health care and how it like really won't make a difference. I remember when I was younger, my mom, we were going to the emergency room, someone was sick, I can't remember who it was, but I remember her making us all go and change our clothes out of our pajamas, fix our hair, because they're not going to take us seriously if we go. They're going to treat us badly, but something was happening and it was an emergency in the middle of the night that we had to go, right?
Right.
So these are things that we have to think about and no one else has to, and I was just like, oh, wow, so right, like universal healthcare is not
It's
gonna
like
change.
you've got appendicitis and you're throwing up blood, but your mom is like, look, change your underwear and put on your good shirt so that they will take you seriously. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even I mean, and we are so conditioned to be automatically mistreated and dismissed by just regular society. It's funny that I catch myself doing it. Even those of us who do this work, we catch ourselves living out this conditioning. Like whenever we stay at a hotel, do you know that I clean up after myself?
Yeah.
Why? Why? Somebody tell me why you do that.
So you don't look messy. They're thinking, you know.
Because you don't want people to think that you are a horrible, slovenly person.
Well, you don't, right.
Blackness.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, that,
Exactly.
That there's this always that, you know, that extra effort that has to be placed, you know, in order to not be judged. You know, the same, and it goes to that, what would you do? You guys remember that show, What Would You Do?
Mm-hmm.
You remember, did anybody ever see that Bike Thief episode? Right, where they had like this, they had a bike that was set in the park.
Right.
And they had a young white man who was trying to steal the bike for like 45 minutes, and people were asking him, is that your bike? And he's like, it's about to be. And nobody does anything. And then they reset, and after a little while, and they have a young black man dressed exactly the same way with the same, he had the same script. You know, is that your bike? It's about to be. Within about 30 seconds, he was surrounded, and people were taking pictures and calling the cops. And the reality is just that that's what that implicit bias that we're talking about. That if you ask anybody who talked to the people who did not call the cops on a white guy, if he was black, would you be calling the cops? They would tell you no, and they wouldn't be lying to you. They'd be lying to themselves. They really would believe that they would not have called the cops. And if you ask those people who are surrounding that young black man, would you call the cops if he was white? They would be very confident that they absolutely would. Yeah, because he's stealing a bike. You would not be able to convince them without this experiment that they wouldn't have done the same thing. And that's the reality that we live with all day, is that we are going to be treated differently by people who have no idea that they see us differently, that they're engaging with us differently, and that if we were white, that they would do something different. We're going to be treated worse by people who believe that all people should be treated equally. Those people are going to automatically treat us worse because of that implicit bias. We have to live with that all day, every day.
And fight against this conditioning we have in us to act against it, right? To always protect ourselves against it, and it's tiring. I saw.
So for most of our group right here, where we have a fellowship, it's called Kairos Fellowship, and it's a group that's working towards like equity within this, I guess, what is that, online digital tech organizing world.
Right.
We're all people of color, queer, like cohort, and we're working on expanding it. But a lot of it, one, I feel like the talk about money within this work is really important. It's like, one, how are the organizations that are in this room giving money to work that's really important, but is led by people of color or sun-kissed communities? And I think that, and then what are you all doing to support your staff, right? And what are you doing yourselves to take away any, I guess, like white supremacy structures within your organization that don't let people do good work, right? And I think that those are important questions just for the white people in this room to take home with them, and then to see how that white supremacy is going, like it's happening within your organizations. Because it happens. I work at Sierra Club, Fight for the Future. move on, daily posts. And those are issues that we deal with. And I feel lucky. I've worked for other organizations, and literally after like 8 months, I was like, I'm quitting because I can't be around these white people. But being in the cohort, it's like we have support within each other, and then we also have just support within the fellowship, right? Which you don't have before. And for me anyways, as somebody who's already been in those spaces, but I think those are important questions. So I feel like I'm on the tip of reparations, yes. I want your money, I want your power, but what are you all doing with your money and power to like give it?
Exactly.
So.
I think that's a great point, because we talked about this yesterday, and we've been talking about this all weekend. My major problem with this conference and other political conferences, especially political conferences, is that they expect people of color who are the most impacted by bad politics to pay full price to come to this shit, right? Registration for Netroots was over $300. And first of all, who can afford that? Who is just trying to eat, right? And politics affects all of us. Most people can't afford that. So most people aren't represented here.
Yeah.
That's bad enough. But then when you factor in the issue, the fact that black people in particular cannot afford to get here. I mean, because honestly, the income gap, it's ridiculous. Black people with college degrees are still twice as likely to be unemployed as white people with college degrees. These are the facts. Black people with college degrees still make less money than white people with the same degree for the same job with the same level of education. This is in progressive spaces. These are black folks who have done everything right.
I can think of a very, very personally specific example where there was the black man who was working, who did a large portion of the work in his organization and was getting paid an amount that was significantly lower than a less educated, less experienced white woman that was coming into the space. And when he went to negotiate around that, was considered attacking, and was told how hard it is for white women to negotiate. You know, and so you know, these are. This is and as a black man that, you know, was being told this. And so this is the reality that, you know, that we have to deal with. And so part of what is, you know, the other thing is like when you're being called on like racist shit, just automatically assume it's true. Like maybe they're wrong and maybe they're missing something and maybe they're not getting it, but just assume it's true because probably you're wrong.
Yeah.
Probably you're missing something.
Yeah.
Probably you're those people in the park that did not call the police on the white guy that was trying to steal the bike.
Yeah.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
One of the things that has come up a lot this weekend in particular is with like branding being such a big thing because like we get all the stickers. Like I used to work at Planned Parenthood and they just started putting out the Stand with Black Women t-shirts that they were like selling at their conferences. I've mostly seen white women wearing those t-shirts at this conference and at the other conferences. And I feel like for white people who see other white people wearing that stuff, like if you see them or if you're gonna buy it, like ask yourself, like what are you actually doing to stand with black women? Like what are you actually doing for like no Muslim ban and things like that? Like, and if you're not, like take the Black Lives Matter sticker off your backpack. Like don't wear that unless you're actually like doing real tangible things internally or like in your organization or with people on the ground. Like put your money towards it and not in a way that like you're buying a t-shirt and you don't know where that money is going. You don't know if it's actually like supporting black people, because if it's not worth it. It's not doing anything. You're just making yourself feel like, oh, I feel better because I went to a march and I got a margarita at the end of it, or like I'm wearing a t-shirt and I look good now. Like you don't.
Right, that reminds me, I want to get to that person in the back, but I just want to say there was a quick situation where there was a brother who was running for office and went to like knock on, you know, was knocking on doors and wanted to leave, and the person was like was not willing to, and was about to call the police. They were like, I'm going to call the police because they didn't know what he was on the door for. So, you know, instead of going to see, they just automatically got nervous with this black man, you know. But the irony is that person had a Black Lives Matter sign on their lawn. So it's like, it's an idea in the head, but it's not actualizing in action. It's not actually becoming an and tangible, this idea of Black Lives Mattering, if it's not tangibly, manifesting in my Black life, then it doesn't matter.
Right, there's a lady behind you.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, Sharon, thank you for creating this forum, and I'm glad you got to reschedule to this space. But I actually came from another panel that was about electoral politics and about getting people to run, and it was 3 white women talking about it. And I just sort of like, oh, you know what, I gotta go. and so I'm like, I gotta come here. But real quickly, I actually did run for office, and I ran a district that's 82% white against 3 white men, one of whom was the incumbent. And there was the assumption that he was a good white man because he's pro-choice and he's pro-LGBT. But he voted to fund ICE, he hasn't supported universal health care, and he's voted for every single defense spending bill that kills the people that look like me.
Yeah.
So I think what we need to remember is that our liberation is together. I held a Women of Color caucus yesterday. I was the only non-Black woman of color there. So I'm telling on myself, I'm telling on people who look like me, that we need to step up. That we need to remember that anti-Blackness is something we're guilty of too.
Yeah.
So,
I appreciate your comments, and especially, it's one of the things we wanted to get to around this whole idea of anti-Blackness and how it manifests everywhere, including in the Black community. But the reality is that acknowledging it is a first step, and just recognizing that you're doing that is happening. But that it's the way that Black people and different communities, some of these people are also used against each other is a big issue that also happens. And I saw it when we were in. Was anybody here in the panel yesterday?
Yeah.
That one yesterday? Okay. So remember when they had the video and they were talking with Whoopi Goldberg, and that was one of the instances where they were basically trying to use Whoopi against like everybody who feels offended about blackface. Like blackface, even if Whoopi somehow would be cool with you wearing, you painting your face, it doesn't mean it's cool. You don't get one Black person get to tell you that something is okay, and now you can just decide that all the rest of the Black people's, concerns and the history that is connected to those concerns are irrelevant. And that's one of the things, it happens constantly. We talked about that all the time in the chat. But how this individual or that individual, like Talcum X, is used to, you guys know who Talcum X is? So, it's used, Talcum X is Sean King, yes. That's, you guys know who Sean King is? A lot of times people, get upset because of how, they feel like certain, and that's another thing is like this whole the superstarring of activists in order to
putting certain people on, chosen people on the pedestal to represent all of us, and then we can never challenge those people on some of their problematic things, and then you've got this hive of people. This is why I stay off Twitter, because I'd always have to replace my phone from throwing the stuff across the, and it's this lack of intellectual honesty about people's lack of understanding of where we are and what's going on here. You can be a great activist against police brutality and still not quite understand the system of white supremacy, which is Sean King's problem. His work against police brutality and against overt racism, I'm not crapping on that. But I'm sorry, you can't tell me, you can't convince me, Sean King can't, Hillary Clinton can't, none of those people on that main stage can convince me that Russia is a fucking problem in our election.
It's not.
You can't. You know why? Because I know what the United States did in electing Boris Yeltsin in 1996. And I mean directly sent campaign people to Russia and crafted a campaign to re-elect Boris Yeltsin when he would have never gotten re-elected in Russia, were it not for our interference. And the Russians hated Boris Yeltsin so much that who did they elect after his term was ended? Vladimir Putin. So if anybody has interfered in anybody's election and caused problems, Putin is our fault.
And that's generally how it goes.
And that's generally how it goes.
All our international problems
you
are
want to talk
created by us.
Russia is not responsible for the racial wealth gap. Russia is not responsible for the privatization of public schools.
Police brutality.
Russia isn't that's not the KGB. The KGB did not kill Marcus David Peters in the middle of the street in Richmond, Virginia a few months ago.
Or Eric Garner.
Or Antoine Rose, or Sandra Bland, or Tamir Rice, or none of them. Russia didn't do that. Russia isn't standing on the main stage downstairs talking about 9 miles from here, Ruby Bridges needed federal troops to escort her to class, and we're better than that now. No, that's not Russia. That's leaving out the fact that after Katrina, the venture capitalists and the privatization proponents came into New Orleans, into Treme, and eviscerated public services for poor black people in the 9th Ward. Half of the people in the 9th Ward couldn't even get their houses rebuilt because the insurance companies that these people paid into would not honor their policies. And not one person from the Democratic Party stood up for those people. So don't tell me Russia is the fucking problem.
And also, don't turn around and try to tell us what we can criticize about these individuals. They get lifted and then they get to be a buffer. So anything that, that this person says that makes white people feel comfortable, if anybody else from his community says something different, then you're like, Sean King said, Nina Turner said,
right.
And then this whole Russian narrative is also a way to just undermine and demonize black radical voices.
Exactly.
This whole,
there's a whole history of
Anoa, the Ajamu Baraka,
yep.
These are people are being accused of being Russian operatives. I'm like, can I have some of that check?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But then they're doing this in the defense of the unintelligence agencies that were responsible for the crushing of black liberation movements.
Exactly.
The FBI was responsible for COINTELPRO. Let's not even start with COINTELPRO. Let's start with J. Edgar Hoover as a new agent who was responsible for getting Marcus Garvey deported. Marcus Garvey, the destruction of the UNIA, was J. Edgar Hoover's first case at the Bureau of Investigation, before it was the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So the CIA, they've toppled governments. They have been involved in the covert operations to assassinate democratically elected leaders. These are our intelligence agencies that these people are defending and saying that we should trust them. They've killed our people.
And
Why should we trust them?
I was going to say that, yeah.
Look, we are running out of time, and we're supposed to go to the Whitney Museum.
Do any of you guys have any questions?
Yeah, not a question, but before I didn't want to just leave. I wanted to thank you for donating your time and thank the folks of color for letting us into the space for a minute, and just thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and like I said, I have cards if anybody wants a card. And I wanted to say, sis, before you leave, I guess you were leaving. I wanted to just, as it relates to what you were talking about, as it relates to us needing to work more together. The thing that I find, sometimes I hear some people from the black community saying, why are we going over here and dealing with this fight, or why are we over here dealing with that fight? And that's not what I hear most commonly, but I do know that dialogue, that conversation is out there. But most of what I experience is that people from the black community are strong allegiance with other oppressed communities. And and that allegiance is not reciprocated as much as it should be. And that is why you hear sometimes those voices, because it's the same tiring of like, we go out for them and they're not coming and standing out for us. And I get there. Like, I had a friend who's like, guys know what's going on in Nicaragua. It's like, we should go over and help. And I'm like, I'm not helping in Nicaragua. I will go to Haiti.
Yeah.
Because once Nicaragua's cool, who's going to go to Haiti with us?
Right.
Nobody's going where the black people are suffering. So my black ass needs to go where black people are suffering. If I'm going to put my booty on the line, I'm putting my booty on the line for the brownest.
And
You know, and not because I don't care about the others, but because I have had too many experiences where they're not caring about me. And my kids are going to be fucking safe. My kids are going to be okay.
Right. And in the real, and just to close, in the realm of politics, of electoral politics, consider this, and I promise I'm gonna leave you with this, and I'm not gonna say it.
I'm going to say something else.
See, whenever we get together, this is always what happens. So, consider that in 1994, when Democratic hero Bill Clinton had a press conference to announce the 1994 crime bill. I know we litigated all of that. We're not going to litigate that again right now. I just want you to realize this, that this is what the Democratic hero did, and nobody has ever called him out on it. He held the press conference announcing the crime bill on Stone Mountain, Georgia, in front of a couple of platoons of mostly black incarcerated men. This was in 1994. A Democrat did this. So, fast forward to this election. And when we bring up the fact that no, we can't vote for Hillary Clinton, are you out of your fucking mind? Do you know what her and her husband did? We hear from a lot of white women, well, why would you blame her for what her husband did? And then we explain that no, she was the one who was campaigning for the crime bill, calling our children super predators. And then we're told by mostly white women, well, no, she didn't mean racism. She didn't mean black children. But when we explain, no, she and her husband had a 3-hour meeting with the doctor, doctor, or whatever, whoever he was, who came up with the theory, who wrote in his paper that yes, he was talking about mostly poor, mostly black children when he said super predators. So when they used that term, they knew they were talking about our children. We were continually told we had no choice but to vote for her, or otherwise we'd get Donald Trump.
Which is a gift.
As if what was done to us by Bill Clinton wasn't already as bad and hasn't been as bad as what America thinks it's seeing right now, but we've been going through it for 40 years. We got people in prison today who have been locked up under those racist, mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug possession offenses. And people are now making mad money off legal weed. And we can't get those people out of prison. We can't get our people out of, we couldn't under Clinton, we couldn't under the first black president. We were told that we should be glad that we got a reduction in the disparities between the mandatory minimum sentences. So how is it that extremely unfair, we're supposed to be happy with, it's not as unfair as it was. They're still in prison. So this is what the Democratic Party has been telling black people. It's not like a suggestion. No, this is what they have done. And this is what, when we push Democratic candidates on, we keep hearing from them, well, just wait. Well, now is not the time. Now we have to deal with Donald Trump. This is a bigger issue. There is no bigger issue for us than our freedom. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to survive whatever's coming next, there is really no bigger issue for you either. Because this is your freedom too. That's
So
all I
what
got.
I wanted to just say, thank you, is I'm not left and I'm not right, I'm out. And I don't believe that there is any liberation within the context of this system. I'm not just not about electoral politics. There's a reason I'm not about electoral politics, and I'm not about electoral politics because I'm not about the system and trying to figure out how to make things better within the context of a system that was created and only protects that same initial group that we talked about, the cis, straight, wealthy white men. That is the only person who is fully protected within the content of the system. If you look at who wrote that Constitution, if you look at who wrote the Declaration of Independence, there's only people from that very specific group who were penning that because they only had themselves in mind. Everyone else are their subjects. And I am not here, I was not born to be a subject to any individual, and certainly not those individuals. And so I do not believe in the system. I believe in building outside of the system completely. And the only value to me in electoral politics is to use it strategically to support building outside of the system. But the inside-outside strategy of people talk about inside-outside to force the system in a certain kind of way. It's never going to work, and it's never going to work indefinitely. If they do end enslavement, then they will incorporate mass incarceration. In this system, it is always going to be keeping our communities at the bottom and making sure that very few people get outside, get out of the top. So that system has to go. So that's me. That was the one thing. I wanted to also talk about reiterate the importance around finances. This is what I do. All I do is work on liberation. All I do is liberation work. And if that means that there are weeks that I don't have money for food, that means there are weeks that I don't have money for food. And that's literal. That's my life. I bring in income. I do the anti-oppression work, for instance, that I do in consulting and training, pays me pretty well, and I live off of that until the next contract may come in or whatever. But I also have a kid in college. I literally, my child is completely good. My child is good, but she's good to the degree that sometimes I can't afford it, that sometimes I skip meals. And I'm supposed to eat all 3 meals because if I don't, I lose weight. And I have a hard time keeping my weight up. But this is just my reality. But I'm not willing to step outside of the work that I do and take from the momentum that I built on what I'm working on to go and get some regular job that doesn't have purpose and meaning. So, and I'm just one individual. And there are so many individuals who this work is what they do. And so, yeah, it matters with whether or not the money, because these financial resources, they go into all of these white hands. They really do. They go, how much money do people get to throw these marches? And, that are accomplishing jack shit. While you have people who are on the ground feeding children, on the ground, taking care of families. I know people who are housing homeless families, and finding out that doing the actual work, but have no money, but couldn't get a quarter of the money that somebody got to throw a march. So when you're thinking about how your resources are going, think about the fact that there are people who are on the line. That's the reason why that woman puts that $50 in my account. There was another woman that was doing that for a long time, and then she started putting her money into the account of a single family, in the same spirit. So, and the last thing I wanted to just say, I want to just mention the matrix effect. Yeah. The matrix effect is looking at the fact that everyone is programmed, right? And so, as it relates to this larger system, that when the programming that's in people causes people to shift and become agents of the system. You remember how in the Matrix, when you were inside of the Matrix, people would be walking down the street and Agent Smith would just shift in, if Neo was anywhere, he had to fight Neo, Agent Smith could just jump inside of anyone to fight Neo. That is what people are in this general system as well. Suddenly, Agent Smith, or the people become the agent to fight those who are actually making any progress in the system. So, if the white people are the most compromised within that context because they associate with whiteness, not because of who they are, but because of the association with whiteness. It makes the triggers, the things that threaten the system, threaten whiteness. And so the association with whiteness makes white people feel threatened. And so then when somebody is doing something that is going to make progress against the system, when somebody is being radical, that sense of threat, and that's where the fragility comes from, that sense of being threatened is what is triggered, and then that's when the sabotaging begins to happen. And so that's one of the reasons why I said if somebody accuses you of something that's racist, just believe them, because that you're not going to see it, right? But you're being triggered to be a saboteur. You're being triggered to be an agent of the system that you're fighting. And and so one of the things that you can do is to really think about your association with whiteness and the fact that it was given to you. It was given to you intentionally. It was given to you intentionally to separate you from those of us who actually are more aligned and connected to what it is that that you want to accomplish for yourselves and in your lives. If you begin to not necessarily with your children, don't give them that association with whiteness. You can explain to them more. Like, people are going to call you white, but you're not really white. You can just begin to try to think about how to approach this differently. That there are people who, it's different for black people. We don't have we have to connect to our blackness because it's how we survive together. And then there are things that we have survived, and then there's traumas that we have to deal with and overcome. But the association with whiteness is kind of like the difference between black power and white power, right? White power is about oppression, and black power is about freedom, liberation. And it's similarly, the association with whiteness is a form of oppression. It is about, and the association with blackness is about survival of that form of oppression. So I just wanted to leave you with those things, and thank you all. You guys are welcome to talk to us or each other.
Yep.
Hopefully you got something out of this, and please, if you want to get a card, I'm
Come on up. Oh, we're streaming this here on. If you want, you can access this stream on our page, Coffee, Current Events, and Politics. In Luqman Nation.
Hey, you welcome.
Thank y'all so much. Thank you very much. I keep getting the time wrong. I forgot.
We're out behind.
Yeah.
What is this live streamed on?
On our page.
To that page?
Yeah, Coffee, Current Events, Politics.
Okay, perfect.
Or what we call black spam.
Very much.
Perfect. For all of this and for
Thanks for coming and staying.
Hey, thank you very much.
Very, very informative.
Thank you.
Being South Louisiana, it's a very conservative, very white, area. There's a lot of information that we don't get to hear on a regular basis.
Yeah. This is what we do all the
I'm so glad
time.
because I tried to come yesterday and I ended up going to the
Hey,
indigenous
all right.
thing instead.
Yeah.
And I was so glad that I actually got moved over so that I
No,
could actually
DC.
Easy. Okay.
Yeah.
I lived in Richmond for 3 years, so I know the lead organizer. All my friends are turned up
Okay.
by Marcus, so I've been down there a couple of times.
Just digging up to see.
Oh, you did that? Oh, I'm from up there.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Originally, from Camden.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just moved to Philly from Richmond. So.
How you like it, Philly?
I live in West Philly. It's nice. It's a little less like the north than I thought it would be.
Right,
So
right,
close to the
right.
south, so
Right.
I don't like it like that, but I'll probably move back to the south soon anyway.
I know that's right.
All right, it was nice meeting you.
Hey, same here now.
Oh, okay. Cool. That's smart.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for you.
Thank you for
very
coming.
much.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Nothing happened on my
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
to also connect with you guys because of, this is yours. Okay.
Yeah, that's